A very good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first behind-the-scenes interview series interview of 2026. So thank you for joining us today. And before we begin, I would like to briefly acknowledge that Coral Expeditions has experienced two significant operational incidents in recent months, which have been covered by international media, including here in the UK. And we recognize that many in our audience will probably be aware of these events. So while these incidents are not the focus of today's conversation, we do want to acknowledge them with transparency and respect. So the safety of guests, crew, and communities remain Coral Expeditions' highest priority, and the company continues to work closely with relevant authorities while maintaining its long-standing commitment to responsible expedition cruising and exceptional cruise experiences. So for those of you who would like further information or have very specific questions regarding these matters, I would like to invite you to reach out directly to Elizabeth Webb by email, who will be happy to assist from Coral Expedition. So, and if you need the email address, let me just know. I will share with you later on today. But today's session really is dedicated to deepening understanding of the regions that Coral Expeditions operate in, and it is my incredible pleasure to welcome Ian Morris, who is a zoologist, educator, conservationist, author, and one of Coral Expeditions' most senior expedition lecturers. So Ian is widely regarded as one of the leading authorities on the Kimberley, Arnhem Land, and the Spice Islands. His career spans decades of work alongside Aboriginal traditional landowners, national parks, schools, universities, and global documentary teams, including the BBC Natural History Unit and National Geographic. So few people are as uniquely placed as Ian to help us understand how human history, Indigenous culture, and natural ecosystems are so inseparably linked across these regions, and how expedition cruising, when done thoughtfully, can bring these connections to life, and in a very powerful and respectful way. So this is a really special opportunity, and to learn from someone who has an incredible knowledge of these places. And I am really, really excited for Ian joining us today. Thank you so much, Ian.
My pleasure.
Brilliant. So, well, let's start probably from the beginning. And you have spent most of your time working across Arnhem Land, the Kimberley, and Northern Australia. So to those in the audience who may not be very familiar with these regions, how would you describe them and their significance in the global context?
Well, it's the northern coast of Australia, and it's the tropical region, and sometimes we call it the monsoon region. And it's relatively low lying. We have mountain ranges, but only small ones. A lot of level coast, and a lot of islands. And then in terms of human beings, we have traditional Aboriginal groups who are quite different from each other all the way along the coast in small geographical areas, different languages, different histories, even different genetics. So we find it very interesting in moving along the Northern Australian coastline in our expeditions and meeting all these different Aboriginal people who vary greatly from area to area.
Brilliant. And what about the unique natural phenomenal landscapes that someone can encounter for those who may not be very familiar?
Well, we have, as I said, a lot of low-lying country, mainly areas like Kakadu National Park, which has hundreds of square kilometres of wetlands. So we have a lot of wetlands where our big rivers discharge from further inland. They discharge up to the coastal north and spread out. And we have a wet and a dry season. So for part of the year, this time now, actually, I'm here in Darwin and it's quite wet at the moment. There's up to 3 meters of rainfall in about three to 4 months. And for the other 8 months or so, there's hardly any rain. So we have quite a variable climate year to year, and that makes it interesting too. So as a result, our plants and our animals are very seasonal. Yeah, and Aboriginal people, as a result, who've lived and managed this land for so long, they are also very seasonal. So whenever we link up with an Aboriginal group from a particular area, they will then explain to our guests how it all works and what happens at this time of the year, and then what happens, and then what happens. And they had to be in the right place at the right time in their annual harvesting of resources to get food and so forth. So they were always one jump ahead of the climate. So they knew what was coming next. So in some ways, it's a very clockwork climate. We always have a wet season. We always have a dry season. And then the landscape itself, as we travel along the coast, we usually travel within sight of the coast. It does change a lot from wonderful sandstone hills to these lowland areas and beautiful beaches and rivers, estuaries and things like that.
Okay. And talking a little bit about then the Aboriginal traditional owners, you worked with them for many decades, right? So, and we were just chatting before starting this conversation about how deeply or relationships matter in arranging expedition cruising or just sort of, learning about this part of the world. So could you please explain a little bit more to the audience, why is that long-term relationship so central to understanding this part of the world?
Well, I spent many years going to university and getting qualifications, as you do.
Yeah.
My best qualification by a long way is what I learnt as a young person growing up in Aboriginal communities from these old traditionally born men and women. They taught me how they managed Australia for, we're saying, 65 or more thousand years consistently, how they managed the country that we're visiting so well for so long. And I see it as my best educational qualification. And I'm in payback mode to those people because I'm employed because of that knowledge, not about the various things I did at university, zoology and science and whatever. It's my knowledge of Aboriginal Australia, which I just pass on. And so doing these expeditions with coral expeditions has been a great opportunity for me to be able to pass on a lot of this information, which is now no longer available. The traditionally born people of Australia are gone. They're finished. That era has finished. And their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a few of them, have joined into modern Australia. But as a result, they've been disconnected from their traditional knowledge, their traditional education systems and so forth. And suddenly people like me realise, wow, we've been brought up by these amazing traditional people. And now I feel a great desire to pass a lot of this information on. And expedition cruising is probably the best way of the lot.
Absolutely. Oh, that's very interesting. And so, talking about the knowledge and that and wisdom that the landowner shared with you when you were living around them. So, what is the most surprising thing that you find travelers are interested to learn, or what surprises the most about hearing those stories and meeting the Indigenous landowners?
Well, a good percentage of our guests are Australians. And in Australia, we have a very poor education system in terms of traditional Australia. We really are not taught a lot in our education system about what happened before Captain Cook arrived in 1770. And what I love teaching is what a lot of our guests want to know. They know they haven't been told the full story and they don't know the real history of Australia because they've never met Aboriginal peoples, particularly traditionally born ones. So they come on our vessels and they are hungry for that kind of information. And I say to them, this trip will change you, whatever expedition we're doing, it will change you. And it does. And in the process, I'm able to introduce them at various locations to these Aboriginal people. And I get them to ask questions themselves directly to the people, and the people give direct answers. That's the best part of the whole lot from my point of view, and linking them up. So yeah, it's a deficiency in our understanding of traditional Australia, both for Australians and of course our guests from overseas have a ball. They love it. They learn all this stuff anyway with us. So no matter which way it works, it's exciting doing these cruises cross-culturally.
Brilliant. And because I think, for the context, and just in case there are some people in the audience, Aboriginal culture is the longest living culture in the world. And I think many expedition cruise companies also include, when they travel in this region, there's an element of learning about the rock art and sort of, and the I don't fully know everything, but the dream weaving, there's just so much. Yes. So all sorts of different things, which is fascinating. But one thing I personally didn't know is the I didn't appreciate is how seasonal things are. So when you are traveling during or just after the wet season, because I understand that Kimberley region as well has this natural phenomena where it has the second largest tidal range in the world, I think, after Fundy Bay in Canada. So,
right.
So the traveling after the rainy season is very different to what you would probably experience from natural point of view late in the season. Shall we talk about that? Just a little bit about, how Kimberley coast changes at different seasons and what are the highlights and also the human part of that. How does that change in storytelling?
Well, as I said, we have this big seasonal swing every year from very wet to very dry. And so, as you mentioned, at the start of the season, which is the end of the wet season, the cyclones have all faded out and everything's gone back to beautiful. That time of year, usually April, May, June, that it goes very quiet. The seas go almost glassy, but the waterfalls are thundering. There's a lot of water from the few months of wet season pouring off the sandstone plateaus and rocky areas down through the rivers. The waterfalls are thundering. It's quite spectacular. And the interesting thing is people often say to me, when's the best time of year to do a Kimberley trip? And I say there's no best time. They're all good times. So whenever you do it, you might want to do it again later on in a different time and see the difference. But there are always good things to see. But the first few trips of the Kimberley season, March, April, May sort of period, that's when you see the runoff, this amazing amount of water that's come from the northwest monsoons. The water comes down from the Himalayas in the northern hemisphere across the equator and Indonesian area. They picks up all this moisture and it dumps it in northern Australia. So we really do get some spectacular runoff with the waterfalls and everything at that time of the year. So then it's quietly, because a lot of it is runoff, by about year, it is quietened down. The waterfalls are still flowing and still looking beautiful. And we put our explorers underneath them and everybody gets wet and it's beautiful, crystal clear, perfect water. But then other things happen. The humpback whales come up into the bays to have their calves. The crocodiles are nesting and they have their little babies and so forth. And we never see, we always see something new every excursion and we hardly ever see the same thing twice. But we do get to know a lot of the individuals. Some of these humpback whales now, they know us. They know our boats. They come up and they show off and they jump around. The crocodiles will swim right around close to the boat. So everybody gets lovely photos of wild crocodiles, which are not killing machines. They're quite friendly like dogs. They just like to interact with people. So we're able to show people that you can have a relationship with these different types of animals, and in the Kimberley particularly. Quite often, if I'm on shore, I'll catch a snake of some sort and quieten it down and then give everybody a pat. And then we put it back and it goes back to the bush. So it is a good chance to interact with nature in that sense. We see a lot of beautiful birds. The Kimberley has a large variety of native birds. And we can usually see them. We have to go to the right place at the right time, but our crew know where they are. And so that's really good. So often we'll be cruising in the Explorer up one of the rivers. We'll say, now everybody nice and quiet, and you'll hear a little bird call. And it's the black grass wren. It's got a little electric sound. And they're one of the biggest ticks in the bird watchers book to see a wild black grass wren. And we often see them from our vessels just by being quiet and knowing where to look. So wherever we are and at whatever time of the year it is, we know where to look and we know what to see. And Kimberley's always exciting. Right up until the last trips of the season, where there's been no rain for 6 months, 7 months. And a lot of the birds and animals are starting to get ready for this coming wet season. And they come out and are quite visible. So that's an exciting time of the year too. Often in those last expeditions on the Kimberley coast, we'll get the first storms as well, which are fantastic. They only last half an hour. They come from the east to the west, and we get some beautiful photos. And you get shots of lightning, and the whole place wakes up when those storms go through. As I say, they only last about half an hour a day, or that you might go 2 or 3 days without one. But most trips will see them at the end of the year and everybody's up on deck to get photos of these lovely storms passing, and seeing the reaction of the native animals, particularly birds.
Brilliant. And considering that majority of our listeners, because ECN is based in UK, so Australia for us is far away country, and of course, Australia is famous for its unique wildlife, among other things. And I believe you personally love reptile. Well, you really like reptiles. So, what would be your message to those, travel advisors and travelers who are a little bit afraid, because we're not, we don't live that close to wild things, as I suppose our imagination dictates about how Australians have that relationship. So, tell me about reptiles.
Well, I grew up with reptiles. I love reptiles, and living in Arnhem Land, when I was a teenager, I'd often go hunting with the traditional people, and they would teach me their side of reptiles.
Okay.
Now, I used to eat some of the reptiles. There's a couple of kinds of goannas that they eat. They eat turtles, but they have this empathy for these reptiles, which I learned as a young kid. You might have to eat these goannas, but you love them. They're a special animal. They're there for you, but you've got to look after the population. You can eat some, but you've got to follow the rules and make sure there's always plenty of them. So they had these strong conservation values built into their culture, which really impressed me. And I learned in those young years that you can have a relationship with every kind of animal, reptile, bird, mammal, insect even, if you're not scared. Now, one of the problems is if we grow up in a city, we don't learn that. And, scary things, snakes, lizards, birds. Whereas the Aboriginal people taught me the other side of it. Hey, you enjoy these things, and I do. So I like passing that on as well. I teach our guests, don't be afraid. I'll show you something. Look at this. And a 3-meter crocodile will swim along beside our boat. And it's got its eyes half shut. It's relaxed. It's not looking at them as food, as our society teaches us. It's enjoying our company. You can have a relationship with these things. It's come out because it's come out 25 times before with coral expeditions, and he loves swimming around and getting his taken. And people see the other side of nature. And so that's one of the things I like passing on.
Brilliant. So beside the saltwater crocodiles and you mentioned some snakes, what else can guests expect to see? Birds and and all that.
Well, yes, certainly. There are a big variety. Going back to reptiles first, there are many kinds of unique, or we call them endemic reptiles in the Kimberley. Special geckos. I take guests into these caves, dark caves, and we have little head torches, and I show them one of the world's biggest geckos, and we can actually touch it. They let us do that now. These geckos, they got used to tourism in a sense. So there's lots of things in the reptile world. Then of course, as I said, the bird. A lot of our guests do know a bit about birds, so they got their binoculars and they want to see this and they want to see that. So I'm quite happy to help them find those things and give them the information I have on those particular species. And then there's mammals. Now in Australia, unlike places like Africa, in Australia, our mammals are mainly nocturnal. They come out at night. So we don't see a lot in the day. However, we do expeditions in our explorers away from the main ships, and we go up the rivers with spotlights and we show people what happens at night, what animals are out. The flying foxes are feeding in the flowers and all sorts of things. We see water rats swimming around catching fish. And so there are ways we can show people how these nocturnal animals live. But North Australia is quite different to most other parts of the world. We have a wide variety of mammals, but they're active at night and snoring in the day.
Excellent. So actually, while we are at this, let's talk about a typical day, sort of how early activities start, how many a day people can expect, and just a variety of things that happen on board the ship and offshore when in Kimberley coast, if that's okay with you.
Right. Well, our expeditions are guided by what we call an expedition leader. We have an expedition team. People like me, guest lecturers, we're part of that team, but there's an expedition leader. He or she are the ones who prepare the day's program. And normally it's based on habitats. So in North Australia, our biggest habitat is eucalyptus woodland, gum tree forest, if you like. Savanna woodlands is another name for it. That's our biggest habitat. And we have a lot of wildlife in those habitats. Then we have mangroves. Then we have monsoon forest, which is a variety of rainforest for up here. Then we have stone country. All of those places have specialist animals in them. So when the expedition lead prepares the day, he or she will announce that we're going to go up such and such a river and we'll be in this habitat and we'll be keeping an eye out for this and this and this. So it's sort of based on habitats really, and all of those habitats have unique wildlife in them, usually specific to those habitats.
And how does weather impact what you are doing and what you're not doing? So, because obviously I would imagine at certain times of the year, it's very, very hot. So maybe you start quite early in the morning or just, let's talk about the weather, what people can expect, especially coming from Europe.
Well, there's no rain. So we know the days are going to be clear and beautiful. Some days may be cloudy. That's about the biggest change we'll get. And it can be hot in the middle of the day. That's why our vessels have got these, on the back of our vessels, we've got explorer boats, which will take 65 passengers in comfort with a roof. They do over 30 knots. They're beautiful. And we go up the rivers. We leave the ship at anchor and we'll go and explore an area of river, and we might see crocodiles nesting along the banks. We might see dolphins feeding. It just depends. But we do time it so that we're not out in the middle of the day. But if we do happen to be coming back later in the morning, the explorers are moving, they're cool, and they've got a roof over them. And so most comfortable. So it really is not that critical if we have to be out at midday. But generally, it's all designed around the climate so that we have a good time. We're back on the ship for lunch or whatever. And we're not out in the hot sun. We're never out in the hot sun, really. We do beach walks and other things like that. But normally, we're in the explorers, associated with the explorers. If it's hot, we all jump back off the beach, jump on board, and we'll go for a cruise instead, where it's cool as air movement and so forth. So it's a great way to see tropical Australia, really.
Absolutely. And talking about swimming, are there any opportunities at all? Because obviously we are in crocodile country, and but I just it's a question that comes up.
Yes, well, we do know areas where it is safe to swim in fresh water, and there's a couple of locations where it's safe to swim on beaches where we can keep a good eye on the whole area. As you know, the company has to be careful and cautious with crocodiles. They are capable of eating people, but under normal circumstances, where we haven't got too many fishermen pulling out all the fish out of the rivers and the water, the crocodiles are well fed. That's their main food. Even the big saltwater crocodiles feed mainly on fish. If you're in areas that are ecologically intact, the crocodiles do not look at humans as food. And so we know where to go and what to see. And there are places that the crocodiles don't go to. And we've been using those as swimming places for many years. Usually a couple of times on an expedition, we can get a chance to have a swim either in fresh or salt water, mainly in fresh water, in elevated pools too high for crocodiles and sharks and things like that to get into.
Brilliant. And and talking about the lectures, because what kind of lectures can guests expect during these voyages? What are the key topics would you say clients get to learn about this part of the world? During a typical voyage. There is such thing.
Well, that's my main role is delivering presentations on board up in the lounge where it's comfortable and air conditioned with a good view around the ocean while you're there. And so we cover, it's depending on where we're going, but I cover the landscape and how it was formed, its history perhaps, then the wildlife that's there, particularly the endemics, the unique fish, plants, animals, birds, the special things to that area that we want to keep an eye out for. And then I'll get towards the end of the expedition, I'll get into people and who are the people are here. And then I've got a lot of personal information that I can pass on, lots of good images. And these days, we do have some Aboriginal people who are coming on as guest lecturers. And that's even better. So I've got a young man who's been training with me now on board for about 6 years. And he's better than I am now. He's really, really good at it. His presentation skills are all there. And he's got the history. with his people to be able to pass on direct. So yeah, we all do that. But often, if I can do a joint presentation with my mate Goima, who is actually son to me in Aboriginal relationship terms, not genetically, but classification. Goima and he's been with me since he's been a little boy.
Okay.
And his parents and grandparents were my mentors when I was a little boy. So we've got a lot in common. And to be able to do a duet, a cultural duet, is really, really good. We can't do that every voyage, but that's the sort of information we like passing on as direct as possible.
Okay, and so let's talk a little bit more about people and about the relationships you have and the gentleman who you know so well and who joined. So, I mean, I'm sure you have great skills in the education system and you worked in that part of the sort of industry as well. But what was surprising when you started working with him in terms of how to communicate with the probably most of the times sort of Western Europeans or sort of descendants of Western Europe? How like what was surprising to you of how,
Yes.
or even from your own, probably you were surprised much earlier in life, and you by that point you already knew how to how to help
Well,
him and how to also, I hope I was
I
clear enough with my
from
question.
when I started way back, I started
Yeah.
guest lecturing um, in early 2000s, and I often used to bring Aboriginal children with me, boys and girls, teenagers,
Okay.
and they would explain to the guests. They do dancing for them and explain what it's like to be an Aboriginal teenager in today's society. And a couple of them have gone right up into adulthood. And I guess the thing that surprised me most with Goima,
Hmm.
uh, who's my associate now, he had no fear of audiences. So you've got often 100 people on board or more,
Okay.
and they'd all be sitting in chairs, and he would stand there, and he does now. He'll speak for an hour with a microphone, just quietly explaining about traditional life, and then he'll talk for another half an hour and answer their questions. And sometimes their questions are way offline. He's quite happy with that. And there are certain things that Aboriginal men cannot talk about. It's women's stuff, and certain things Aboriginal women don't talk about because that's men's things. So Goime is very, very good at explaining to the lady who's asking about marriage customs or finer details than that. He'll explain it's not actually his role to however, in broad terms, and he'd cover it. He's learnt to be really, really good that way and answer all questions one way or another. And
Hmm.
now we've got young girls coming through the system. Hopefully they'll take over and be able to do the women's side of things as well. But I think the thing that surprised me most was the fact that these kids would enjoy the guests as much as they do. Often when the kids would come with me, their English levels weren't high, quite low, but they're at school and learning.
Hmm.
That didn't slow them down at all. They just loved communicating in whatever way they could. And they would teach their language because they still all use their language today, many different languages. So we're hoping to keep all that rolling too in our expeditions.
Excellent. And I assume you also chat to them, what surprises them most about encountering guests on board the ships, because it's hopefully it's a reciprocal relationship between the client and the traditional landowners. So what surprises them, or like what is their perspective of receiving guests to their home and to the land? And
I
do you
think
see
they're
any
very
change there?
proud.
Mm.
I think they're proud of their country and proud of
Mm-hmm.
their people. And of course, the guests are enthusiastic about learning the things that they can teach them. So they realise that fairly early in the piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives them a lot of courage, I think, to address groups of people. And I know with Goima,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that they like us guest lecturers to do is to dine with the guests whenever we can, as often as we can. And from that, we enjoy ourselves and we meet people personally, but we learn what people have come for, what they're looking for, what they'd hope to see on their particular trip, and that way we can try and make sure we cover it.
Yeah.
And Goime just loves doing that. And he loves dining with the guests on his own. He doesn't sit with me. He goes with it. We swap around all over the place. He does it almost naturally. And he looks forward to dinner with the guests.
Brilliant.
each night. So,
Brilliant.
we're joining two cultures in a very interesting way. These people, prior to this kind of coastal expeditions that Coral started, prior to that, there was not a lot of interaction between outsiders, non-Indigenous people, and the traditional owners of the area. A little bit, they'd wave from fishing boats, but there was not a lot of cultural contact, whereas Coral does that. And it works two ways. It makes the people proud of who they are on the land and look forward to the next Coral group that visit them. And the other way around, their guests get to learn directly from Aboriginal people who they are and how they relate to their country.
So I think at the beginning, just before the recording, we were chatting a little bit about the fact that, regretfully, these cultures, because of the modern world, are sort of not dying, but to a degree, the younger generations probably are more immersed in the modern way of living. And do you feel that by authoring these kind of trips to the travelers who are interested to learn about this region, it is somehow helping to revive the cultures as well, or to want to continue to sort of, well, you mentioned the locals feel pride when they receive the guests, but do you see any signs that it's actually even encouraging people to be a little bit more interested in their own culture and the background and the stories that these cultures carry?
I certainly do, and that's why I do these expeditions. And Tony Briggs, who started off the Coral Expeditions Company, when I realised what he was wanting to do, he hadn't quite done it at that point. I said, look, as long as you're keen to do that sort of thing, you've got my support. This is back in 2000. And it really does work both ways. And you're right, their children today have to be in school. Our Australian laws mean the kids have to be in school. The schools are not necessarily cross-cultural. It's national curriculum, and they have to learn English, and they have to be evaluated by the NAPLAN system we have in Australia and so on. So they're being pulled away from who they were by modern Australia, whereas these expeditions are pulling them back again. And it is really good. And it's also showing our guests, 110 at a time, the real side of Aboriginal culture, and they fight for them too after they've done a trip like that. I had one lady who, as we left port on a 12-day run, I told her that I was part of the rebuilding of the Aboriginal communities that were bombed by the Japanese after the Second World War. Family were involved in that. That's why I started off so young with those people. And she said to me, look, my husband's, he's racist. He's not very nice. He's going to interrupt your presentations. And I said, excuse me, he'll have a ball. This trip will change him. She said, you're not listening to me. He doesn't like other cultures much. I said, no. These trips affect everybody in a positive way, and it will change him. Well, they did a double. They did from Cairns right around to Broome. When she got off, she was crying. And she said, I don't know how you did that. And I said, look, remember what I said to you way back in Cairns about your husband, how it had changed him? Oh, it's changed him. And he came off down we were all saying goodbye, shook hands. Thank you very much. You've shown me a lot about Australia. I'm really happy to. And it does that to everybody to some degree or other by doing these coastal expeditions. Cross-culturally, it kind of brings us together. So that's why I enjoy it. That's why I like doing it. I never get sick of it. I'll get old before.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And, so again, talking a little bit about the traditional wisdom, because probably you are the best person to share that with us, because you were so immersed in living in the Arnhem Land. And so what are the most interesting things you learned, or the things that impacted you and you carried with you for the rest of your life, and you continue carrying from that traditional wisdom?
The first thing I noticed was as a young boy, I think I was in Arnhem Land when I was about 7 years old when I first started, but I was going to school at that stage in Sydney, in a suburban school in Sydney, and we were all taught as little students to stand on our own 2 feet, behave yourself, do the right thing, do your homework, and you'll get up and you'll finally get through school and you'll get a good pass and you'll be able to get a good job and then buy a car and get married and have 2.4 children and a dog and a brick fence. And I realized that we're all being aimed at groomed as individuals. Grow up, stand on your own 2 feet. That was the bottom line.
Yeah.
Whereas in Arnhem Land, where I was spending the rest of my time, it was the other way around. And you were part of a social system. And I was a member of the Wadamiri clan. They absorbed my parents into their clan. And as a result, I had a skin, I had all this, and they would teach me how to be a good Wadamiri person. And the bottom line there was, if you're a good person and you do the things that your clan wants you to do, and you respect the animals that I was telling you about earlier, with that empathy to the special animals that your clan has to look after. My Wadamiri clan, they had giant clams, they had octopus, they had probably 15 different symbols in their clan that they were responsible. And they carried the story for those things. They sang the songs for the octopus and the giant clam and the humpback whale, and they were the custodians for that species. So I realized that I was being groomed as a young person to identify with country, with land, and proud of it and look after it. And so that's what I pass on now with our expeditions, is teaching people that these people are connected socially to the land. We're not. We're not attached to the land. We float around like jellyfish around the continent, you know, whereas Aboriginal people are strongly linked to the land and have big responsibilities on their father's country and on their mother's country. 2 different geographical areas they've got to look after. Your sisters go and marry men who are on your mother's side, and you marry women from your mother's side. They come and live on your father's side. It's quite complex social structure. So these are the things that I teach in the latter days of each expedition, but very, very complicated. And I thought Aboriginal people had a much better system than we had. I still do.
Okay. And but would you say, you know, coming a little bit more to sort of like practical things. So a typical Kimberley trip, am I right in assuming it's like around 10 days and it's like Darwin, Broome to Darwin, and then you also have the Arnhem Land expeditions as well, or are they both combined? How does it work?
People can do one of each, or they can do a double.
Okay.
And as I said, that couple I was talking about earlier, they started in Cairns, went around to Darwin. So that's the Barrier Reef, it's Cape York, the Torres Strait Islands, across the Gulf to Arnhem Land, along the Arnhem Land coast, finish in the Tiwi Islands, and then come to Darwin. That's 12 days.
Wow. Okay,
and then the trip will continue on then down to Broome, which is 11 days, 10 nights down to Broome. So you get to see the whole top half of Australia and its people.
Amazing. Yeah.
It is.
And from the, you know, meeting the locals, what would you say is not the percentage, but I mean, how regularly the guests get to experience local communities and to hear from them, or be like more in touch with the culture?
It does vary a bit. When COVID hit, I was actually in London when COVID hit.
Okay.
But when COVID hit, the Australian government kept us apart, as you can imagine.
Yes.
So we couldn't visit communities for 3 or 4 years, which nearly broke my heart. Because as it turned out, Aboriginal people were very resistant to COVID and had hardly any. I don't know. I didn't lose any Aboriginal friends out of hundreds and hundreds, thousands. Didn't lose any with COVID. But anyway, that separated us, and I felt that really sadly. So I would have to try and make that difference up on board in different ways. But we're back together again now. But yes, it varies from trip to trip. And again, it's up to the expedition leader to work out where we're going and then who we might be able to see. And then they'll ring that community, or they might ask me to ring the community, and just arrange it so that when people are there. I often get on the phone when we're coming into a community like Elcho Island, where I grew up, and I ring my mates on the phone and bring all the little kids down to the beach and babies. We can pass them around. And by the time we get there on the beach at Elcho Island, there's 25 people down there, ready to intermingle, and you know, the ladies hand me their babies and I pass them on around. It's just really, really super nice. But it varies from trip to trip.
Okay. And you mentioned that, again, I'm jumping a little bit around, but you mentioned earlier that, when you are dining with guests, you always try to find out what matters to them most.
Yeah.
Can you see some common themes that emerge, what people look for when they come to this part of the world?
Well, I think probably birds would be the
Yeah.
most
Okay.
sought after
Okay.
subject at dinner time. There's usually a couple of people who are mad birdos,
Yes.
and they've come to see this. So I want to learn that. I want to know that because, again, from a very young age, I learned all my bird calls. So when we're going along in the Explorers and I hear a special bird, I know who's interested, and we'll stop the Explorer and have a listen. They get their binoculars out, and we might see whatever it is hopping around. So that helps me in that sense. And then I get to know what percentage of our guests really wanted to learn about Aboriginal Australia. They knew they weren't taught the right details at school, and now's their chance. So then I know, stop here, I'll introduce you to this lady because she'll teach you about weaving and all the things you want to know. So all those little details, come out, and every trip is different.
Okay.
And sometimes we're going to a community and somebody dies in the community and they have what they call business. So that puts a stop to the people have to go to the sorry business and the funeral and whatnot. And that means we can bypass that one and try and get to another community.
Okay.
And so there are things that change the circumstances every trip. And so when I jump on board to start any trip, we have a meeting with the expedition team, expedition leader, then works out what will be best for the next 10 days or 12 days or whatever it is. Yeah, they're all different. No two trips are the same.
I can imagine that. And talking a little bit about the typical coral expeditions traveler, how would you define them? You spend quite a lot of time with them, so demographics, the age, probably sort of interests. Do you see any sort of common threads? Do you have a lot of foreigners coming to join you and so on? So
probably not as many as we'd like.
okay.
But most of the passengers on board are Aussies.
Okay.
And most of them are the older age bracket where the husband has said to the wife, when I retire, dear, I'm going to take you on an expedition along to North Australia. We get a lot in that category.
Okay.
We get a few teenagers, a couple of newly married couples every now and then, and some children and grandchildren. And they get spoilt by the crew, the children and grandchildren. We love having the young ones. There's not many young ones on those. So I guess the age bracket, the biggest age bracket would be 60s onwards,
okay.
70s. And of course, when I started, they were all older than me. Now, very few of them are older than me. I'm 75.
You don't look 75. So in terms of the children, I appreciate that's probably not that many on board the ships, but is there a minimum age for the children to join Kimberley, or would you recommend a minimum age? Because I suppose they have to be interested in the natural world to really enjoy this kind of trip.
I love it when grandma brings the granddaughter.
Okay.
And and then, as I said, they get spoiled by the crew because our girls, our cruise attendants, and that they'll look after her like nobody's business, and they'll show her. So the young ones always have a great trip, and a lady from where was she from? I think she was from France. She brought her son, who was in his 20s, and he was interested in Aboriginal things. She was interested in landscapes. She was a bit of an artist. He was interested in the Aboriginal things. So we separated them.
Okay.
We made sure they both had fully occupied time.
Okay.
And he learned to do Aboriginal dances. I think my young son Goima was on board on that particular run, taught him a lot of the traditional dancing moves and things like that. Yes.
Oh, brilliant.
It varies, but I always miss the young ones. As a school teacher, I had plenty of young ones then, but then suddenly I moved to cruising, which goes to the older groups. So I always enjoy it when the young ones come on board.
I suppose they also have different types of questions, or they surprise you with questions they have.
Yeah, they do.
So absolutely. Okay, so probably the last question, because we are coming to the end of the webinar recording. So for travel advisors or for clients who are considering different expedition cruise destinations. What would be your sort of key message? Why Kimberley Coast or Northern Territory as a wider region be on the list now?
Well, there's a number of reasons. Physically, Northern Australia is least occupied by humans. It wasn't particularly good for gold mining. It wasn't particularly good for the pastoral industry, a bit wild, a bit woolly. And the country got left alone to a large degree, not completely, but to a large degree. And that was fortunate for the Aboriginal inhabitants of those areas. And that allowed them to keep their culture together. So probably today, in areas like the Kimberley and Arnhem Land, Aboriginal culture is the most intact of the whole continent. Whereas down south, Aboriginal people got sort of overrun by the pastoral industry and by humans wanting the country very early in the piece. So they lost their cultural identity. They lost their kinship systems. They lost their languages. They're still there to some degree. But here in North Australia, where we go, it's all intact. And that's the wonderful part about it. So most Australians love going to the north because they've never been there before. And particularly the coastal sections, there's no way to get to them. There's no roads. You can fly over in aeroplanes, but it's very expensive. So our expedition boats go into places regularly that nobody else can get to. And that's what I think what the Aboriginal people like about us. We have smaller groups, so they're handleable, not thousands, but just smaller groups. And they're able to, in their way, pass information on. They're small group people themselves, so they kind of appreciate the lower numbers. And then they form relationships. And a lot of people give Aboriginal man his email address and his phone number. And you know, when I get home, I want to get more about it, that artwork that you told us about. Oh, I'd like to learn more. And so you get connections happening between traditional Australia and modern Australia. And it's good. You know, I enjoy seeing it happen. And as I said, these trips, especially in a cultural and social sense, these trips change people, change Aussies in their way of thinking and understanding, and make them more enthusiastic about the country and the people.
That's fantastic. So with this, I probably would like to finish, but I also would like to give audience an opportunity to ask some questions. I don't know if anyone has any questions at all about Kimberley Coast, Northern Territory, expedition cruising to this part of the world with coral expeditions. Anyone? Okay, no, I don't think we have any questions. So Ian, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's delightful to learn, and I learned a lot as well, actually. So once again, I really hope one beautiful day I will be lucky enough to visit the part of the world you love so much and to appreciate it from a personal perspective. So thank you so much for your time today, and for all of you who joined us to listen. Thank you.
Well, I thank you too, and I look forward to your trip and any other people that are listening. I hope to see you there. And as I said, I'm in payback mode to the people who grew me up, so I'm very happy to pass these sorts of things on. So it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.